Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Futurum Tech Webcast interview series. I'm your host, Shelley Kramer, and we are broadcasting this interview on LinkedIn Live today, and we're really excited to be bringing this conversation to you. Today, we're going to be talking about moving BSS cloud journeys forward, how to make that happen, how to think about platforms. And I'm thrilled to be joined today by my colleague, Ron Westfall from Futurum Research. And also Jason Keane is joining us. And Jason's the head of digital BSS product and solution line from Ericsson. So he's got, I think, a lot of information that you will find very helpful. Welcome, gentlemen. It's great to see you.
Thank you.
Good day.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So this is the second of two events connected to a research report that we partnered with the team at Ericsson on. And our research was into BSS-to-Cloud journeys. And we had a prior conversation that I will link in the show notes in case you'd like to reference that. But today, what we're talking about is the fact that the cloud journey is by no means simple. We understand that. And, I think that personally, when it comes to making any kind of transitions, the partners that you do this journey with make a huge difference. And that's one of the reasons we're talking with Ericsson. So what I want to talk with a little bit is, Jason, cover for us, if you would, why BSS journeys are happening right now. What's the impetus for that?
Many reasons, but I suppose if I go back to the business reasons, which drives the technology, what our customers are seeing and what we're seeing from our customers is the pace of commercial demands have increased. What we mean by that is consumers now and businesses now expect products and offers and services much, much faster than they have traditionally seen. And of course, BSS being the monetization engine of telcos and of network has to move just as fast. We need to be able to capture revenues and capture them faster. I suppose from a cloud point of view and a transformation point of view, what we see that to enable that faster speed, we have to digitize the whole engine and the whole layer itself. And by enabling a cloud and moving this, we can get quicker revenues back from enable quicker offers and get better revenue back from our customers.
Right.
But we also see that when we actually move to cloud, not just from a commercial end, but at a technology layer, we actually see that by modernizing the application stack and modernizing the BSS itself, that we see huge efficiency gains in how people operate their business on a daily basis, how they can upgrade software more effectively, and how they can actually move forward in a much more sensible manner than they currently have. If I just give you a brief example, if we look today in the portfolio and applications out there in BSS, a lot of these have heavy investments over many years. They've grown up with the business and they consume significant financial resources to manage, to maintain, to customize.
Right.
The problem we see now, though, is that the rate of change is so fast that the investments that you have to put into these products to keep them up is no longer sustainable. And then with 5G and new technology, they have to scale.
Right.
Quite simply, the business isn't there. It isn't there to support it. So
Well,
we move like that. Yeah.
No, and I think that that's really the lesson that a global pandemic has taught us, in that our ability to pivot quickly, to be agile, to scale up, to scale down as needed to serve our customers, to serve our employees. I mean, that's really foundational business resiliency and business continuity. And as I said, there are many things that have been negative about navigating a global pandemic together, but I think that's really been good lessons for us. And it doesn't seem like there's ever a good time to spend a whole bunch of money updating legacy systems. But the reality of it is, this isn't nice to have. This is tied to real world dollars, real world efficiencies, and will make an absolute impact on the business moving forward. Ron, I know you have thoughts on that naturally.
Well, you bet, Shelley. And I think to pivot on Jason's point, there is definitely, I think, a sea change in terms of the mindset across the ecosystem. It's not just the operators who understand that they have to adapt their traditional business processes to the cloud environment. It's also in terms of working with their partners It's also in terms of working with their customers, particularly on the enterprise side. And so, yes, the pandemic really did help usher in some of these plans that had been sitting, on the desk and gathering dust. And suddenly it's like, we got to dust these off. Now we really had to act. And now we have to plan for post-pandemic situations. And I think this is encouraging. I think this is definitely giving the impetus for the operators to really play an essential role in the digital ecosystem, the digital value chain. And so I see this as a positive for the entire ecosystem.
Yeah, I think one of the ways that we talk about this is that, BSS is ultimately the monetization engine of investment, right? And it really is, I think. Any thoughts on that in terms of, beyond, we touched on already the financial benefits, the operational benefits, that sort of thing. You want to speak to that a little bit, Jason?
I think, as I said in the opening, the BSS, as you correctly note, it is the monetization engine. It's, it's where you create the offers. Like, you could invest billions into, a 5G network with all of the technology, but at the end of the day, businesses exist to make money.
Right.
And what happens is, you need to create a commercial offer. You need to expose and exploit the network assets to generate money for the business. And I think what you have with a fully cloud native BSS or digital BSS, you benefit from quicker time to market. You can create the offers quicker, you can stand them up. You have the flexibility within the system. You can scale, as Rod has noticed, you can actually scale out. And we see this in the pandemic. The ability to scale rapidly for new demand is essential. Right. But also resilience. It's no longer, you need to be able to scale for resilience, because if you look at the commercial demands, you have to be able to provide reliable services. We've become very intolerant of outages, particularly as we all work from home and everything else. It has a big impact from us. But then if we look a little bit further, it's not just those commercial benefits. Underneath it as well, the actual operators themselves will benefit from the inherent cloud technologies you have with automation, orchestration. And it really comes on to, if we look at the newer technology like the 5G, the huge thing with 5G is it provides so much potential for new business offerings, onboarding of partners to deliver services via a network, right, creating new services. So it's a vital layer that you modernize it quickly to adapt. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things that, once you have a taste of what modernization feels like, there's no going back. It's just, we're so hamstrung by the limitations of legacy systems. And I use this sometimes, an analogy is, I have a late model, car that's powered by tons of smart technology. And I laugh that I don't think I could hit something if I tried, because if I'm backing out of the driveway and I don't see a pedestrian, or if I don't see a car coming, my car will shut itself down. Or if I'm approaching a stoplight and my car feels like I'm driving a little more quickly than I should be to allow me to stop, I can feel my car engaging the brakes. But the point is, like, I'm not going backwards. I'm not going to get in a car that doesn't have those things anymore, because I've realized the maximum benefits. A car, of course, it's safety, and of course I pay more for that. But in the long run, the cost versus the benefit is one that I find that's worth it. And I think this is very true when it comes to, BSS modernization. It's like, once companies realize the true benefits of this, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that we managed to wait this long before we were able to do this, or before we made doing this a priority.
Yeah. And I think just on that, it's important to note, in the same way that you bought the most recent car with it, all these features, right, there was a cost to doing it, right? There's a cost.
Absolutely.
Once you make that cost, you have those benefits. It's very hard to go back,
Yeah.
And this is what we see in the technology space. It's maybe you can maintain that older car for longer, but it gets more expensive. Right. You get less out of it. It drinks more petrol. Right. Versus maybe I make the investment to make the transition to the newer technology. Yeah.
Well, and to extrapolate that out, I have 15-year-old twins who are learning to drive. And as a parent, when we grew up, my first car was not in any way a fancy car. As a matter of fact, my first car was one of those, where you rolled the windows up and down by hand and things like that. And even I have a couple of children who are older and who've already grown and gone, but even their first cars weren't super late model cars. And I think about from an investment standpoint, when I think about from a safety standpoint, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm so accustomed to this being my norm in terms of smart technology and the latest technology, that kind of the thought of my young people being in cars that don't have any of that safety technology does stress me out a little bit. So it is sort of a similar, analogy. It's that, why would I want to go back?
Sure.
There's no real benefit. And whether you're talking about the safety of your family or whether you're talking about protecting your business investments and your ability to scale and drive revenue and all that sort of thing. So moving on, I wanted to talk a little bit about, you have a vast customer base, right? Everybody has a vast customer base, and every customer has unique needs, and there are nuances involved in every situation. So when you approach this, Jason, how do you account for the massive amount of variation across a customer base and prospects in your product development? How do you approach that?
Well, the first thing we have to do is we recognize and we do acknowledge that there's no one size fits all.
Right.
Every customer, it's funny, every customer is unique, but every customer wants commonality as well.
Right.
And if we look, for example, across the hypercloud providers such as Amazon, such as Microsoft Azure, Google, and others, every one of these we see communities we need to run in this environment, and that's okay. The question for us at Ericsson, how do we provide the maximum amount of support for our customers? Because we can't certify and we can't check every single benefit of every single cloud. It's simply too much because cloud and stuff is. So what we've done is we look at what is the core technology that's driving this stuff. And in cloud native, essentially it's Kubernetes, which is a container orchestration system. And when we look across all the cloud providers, this is what they're using to manage these cloud workloads, to make sure the pods, the individual components themselves work. So what we've done in Ericsson, of course, is we've taken Kubernetes and we've shifted our platform using that orchestration. We've written our software to be as generic as possible towards Kubernetes, of course, certifying with our own Kubernetes distribution, but as generic as possible, such that as a customer, if you receive and you want this software, it will work in a generic instance. Key question for you then, of course, is each cloud has its own benefits, own advantages, how further you go to make that suitable for you. Because one of the things with moving to cloud is you're into much broader aspects than about how you're going to life cycle this product, how you're going to upgrade it, how you're going to make it high performance for you. And then you're into a much broader stream of software delivery pipelines, CI/CD, and all of the aspects of that. But from an Ericsson point of view, we want to provide you with the tool sets to get you going, to make sure the products start and behave themselves. And then from a customer point of view, we'll customize the unique advantages of your cloud and your instances.
Right. I think that's important. And, from a selling standpoint, as a customer, I never want to hear, we have a one size fits all solution. That's not really what I'm looking for. Ron, a lot of times I think people tend to approach a transition like this as, sort of a big bang. Let's just go whole hog and jump right in. What do you think about that?
Well, I think we've learned some valuable lessons. I think that's pretty much been discarded as an approach that any operator is going to seriously consider. And I think what is important now is what can be characterized as a stepwise approach. That is, the operator really needs to have a blueprint, a plan as to really how to proceed with their cloud journey. And I think one thing that we really found out from our study, our survey, is that the operators, as they proceed with their cloud journey, is that they gain more knowledge, they gain more awareness about how to really make a hybrid cloud implementation work better, how to really get better outcomes from their cloud journey. And as a result, satisfaction actually increases. So it's really, a part of human nature. There's that, fear of the unknown when you're embarking on a new mission, on a new journey. But as you proceed and you learn, okay, this is something that is valuable. This is something that we're gaining a lot of insight on, how to make our customers more happy, more satisfied. And as a result, the operators themselves become more satisfied because of their cloud investment. So I think that's something that we really won't hear much in our conversations into the foreseeable future. Is like, hey, we need a dramatic Big Bang approach in order to really get a cloud benefit from our BSS transformation.
Yeah, and I think just also approaching it, understanding that this transition is complex, and it as any digital transformation is, right? And it really involves the entire ecosystem for delivery. You're not just changing the infrastructure or the applications that you're using, you're changing the whole way that the internal technical organization behaves. Again, very similar to any digital transformation initiative, and really understanding that, making sure that's understood throughout the organization, and having a culture that embraces innovation and change, and really addressing that and understanding that the end result is so worth it. It's going to take a little time. Everybody needs to be patient, but that it is very much, it will deliver. So I think that's important. I want to touch here on cloud and cloud native, and talk a little bit about CI and CD pipelines and readiness and that sort of thing. Jason?
Sure. So I think, if we start, the concept of cloud is quite mature. It's been out in our industry for a very long time. So it's not new to people, but cloud native is a little bit more. And actually, this is maybe some of, Ron has discussed that, it takes time. You've mentioned it takes time. This is not just a change of the underlying computer, the infrastructure layer. So cloud is a concept design, but cloud native is much more. It's where you actually design not just your applications, but your business process and your commercial process to support that. What it means, basically, if you look at it, in a cloud native world, you have a few key attributes. You have ability to deploy quickly, to scale quickly, maximum amount of configuration and flexibility towards the business. You can upgrade on the fly without any interruptions. You can take on new business models quickly. You can adapt your software. It's a fundamental shift how people are working. Right. And I think where maybe some of the issues we see at the moment is that if people aren't prepared to do that sort of either both commercial or marketing investment, not prepared to do technical investment, they struggle. And if we look, there's a few common things. I mentioned one of the core technologies that you have is Kubernetes. It's well known. It'd be no debate in the industry. This is the container orchestration. But Kubernetes is just an execution environment. It manages and it orchestrates containers. But to get the software in there in the first place, to upgrade it, you need much more frameworks around it. So we hear things like CI/CD pipes, which are basically software ways to continuously integrate, i.e., as we bring in a new feature, make sure it works, and continuously deploy, get it out there in the field. And these frameworks are not simple. You actually have got to set them up, test them, mature them over time. So when we talk about cloud and cloud native is cloud, for example, we've done it. We've taken applications, we've stuck them into virtual machines we're familiar with, but cloud native is much more. It's much more end to end. And I think maybe some of the challenges that we see between, I think Ron was in the research data, the engineers are much more apprehensive about where they are in their cloud journey versus the executives, because maybe the executives thought, hey, this is just an infrastructure update, and the engineers are going, we have to do so much more. So it's quite a big area, and it's complex.
Yeah, I'm laughing because I'm thinking about a lot of times I wear a lot of hats within our organization. One of them is making sure things get done and making sure that promises made are promises kept. So I'm laughing because I think about, somebody out there selling something. Sure, it's no problem. It's great. And then I'm the one who has to make it happen. So I very much feel your engineer's pain because it is the engineer's pain, because it is when you are the folks who have to make things happen, it can be a little anxiety inducing. But that, again, is really the benefit of working with the right partner and You know, one of the things that we talked about in the LinkedIn Live conversation that we had, and again, for anybody just joining us, I will be sure and link that prior conversation with Rick Mallon and Miriam Deasy in our show notes for this show. But one of the things that we talked about was just, you know, part of the key to success is really working together to establish a timeline for this change, for this migration that you really stick to and work together every step of the way to not only develop the timeline and the strategy, but then to execute it. So I think that that helps alleviate engineers' fears a little bit along the way.
Sure.
Ron, some folks might say that the hype surrounding cloud makes it difficult for cloud transitions and transformations to live up to their promises. What do you think?
Well, I think that is part of the reality. I don't think it's unique necessarily to BSS-to-Cloud journeys. I think what is important is the takeaways that we've already learned. For example, we're already seeing the operators successfully partnering with major cloud providers in order to fulfill their significant needs. For example, we see Telefonica Germany partnering with AWS in order to effectively transition their 5G core workloads in order to take advantage of cloud economics, in order to make, you know, that 5G service more successful in meeting their customer needs. And I think what is also important in terms of, you know, understanding, you know, what is real in terms of, you know, the cloud potential is the fact that the operators are, you know, fundamentally committed to this. This is now a question of how to proceed with the journey and so forth. So I think we're past, you know, okay, what the operators are going to do in terms of whether or not they're going to commit to cloud. I think we're well past that. And I think now what is actually very beneficial for all the players involved, not just the operators, but their partners, their clients, and so forth, is, you know, how to proceed in that stepwise fashion to optimize the cloud experience. And that, I think, is a very critical takeaway, is that it's about delivering the best experience to the customer. It doesn't matter if they're enterprise or if they're a consumer, but clearly the cloud is going to play an essential role in enabling that optimal experience. And that includes, for example, you know, flexible billing. It includes, you know, the ability to have a very agile customer interface that allows the customer to, you know, meet what they really need in a very rapid fashion or in a real-time fashion. So I think this is very important to understand in terms of, you know, what about hype cycles? Why, you know, is there so much confusion out in the market about, you know, how clouds can be optimally leveraged?
Right. Absolutely. So I want to shift a little bit and talk about, you know, the advantages to a multi-vendor strategy using different cloud providers compared to using one provider and all of their services. Jason, what do you think about that?
Maybe going back, as mentioned, we see the demand coming in from our customers, mixed bag, on-premise, off-premise. But if we look at just the cloud providers, the hyper cloud providers, the local cloud, they all offer their own competitive advantages, to be fair. They offer their own unique selling positions. And we have to recognize that. So what was interesting in the similar data that we, in the research did, we saw that in the survey, 72% of people believed they would go with Amazon, but in the same breath, 60% would also go with Azure and Google.
Right.
So hybrid is our world, right? So I think if we ask the question, why wouldn't you pick one like Amazon, or why would you pick one like Azure or Google or whomever? I think we have to recognize that each cloud provider does offer their own advantages. Perhaps maybe, you know, if you take Microsoft, they come from the Windows world, was where their primary footprint was, so they're maybe stronger in the IT space.
Right.
Or if it's maybe Amazon, who are popular with developers. But at the end of the day, from a business point of view, it's key that each of the cloud, okay, they'll offer their own benefits, but that you have a common approach, that you recognize that a hybrid cloud strategy is going to arise. That if you pick one, well, maybe you do, but you probably don't want lock-in. They will have their benefits, that you have the flexibility. And this is before we even talk about commercials, who's cheaper, who's more expensive. So I think what I see, at least from a vision point of view, you need to accept for now that it will be a multi-vendor strategy for cloud. Then, of course, the question for you is how do you make sure they connect and I invest in a meaningful manner that I don't go too deep into one and then get stuck in the business.
Right. Absolutely. I think that makes perfect sense. And nobody wants to be locked in, you know? I think that's really the thing when it comes to your technology stack today and, you know, knowing that change is inevitable and, you know, we're in a mode of continuous learning and, you know, again, business is just changing so rapidly. Technology is changing so rapidly. And I think that it's incumbent upon decision makers to say, I need to make a decision, work with somebody that can work with me across any cloud solution provider that I may pick. And also that we can shift if I decide to change my mind. I think that's super important. Ron, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the survey had a surprising note, and Jason touched on that, and that is a doubling amongst the operators in considering AWS 1 to 2 years from now. And that, I think, definitely validates, you know, the idea that the operators are strategically committed to a multi-cloud strategy. This is to prevent that dreaded vendor lock-in. And so, you know, clearly follow the data, follow the evidence, and that is a clear indicator. And I think, you know, we're seeing all kinds of examples of, you know, how, you know, the cloud operators are working with, you know, the telco side to make this happen. For example, AWS and Ericsson are partnered in terms of enabling managed IoT services. And also we're seeing, for example, Microsoft Azure investing heavily on the telco side. They recently acquired Affirm Networks and Metaswitch just to advance that goal. And I think what's also interesting is that we see Google Cloud gaining more interest, more attention. First of all, because you can characterize them as an SDN juggernaut, that, you know, they really are the inventors of Kubernetes. And so that's actually going to be very critical, you know, how the operators maximize their Kubernetes capabilities in terms of not just container management, but also container orchestration. And I think it's also indicative that Google has a optimal edge cloud implementation, arguably, in terms of, you know, the YouTube assets. And, you know, the operators have a lot of real estate that's well suited for these edge cloud implementations. And also the survey indicated that IBM Cloud has a lot of interest amongst the operators. And that's, I think, a due part to their obviously aligned with Red Hat, and that definitely helps with hybrid cloud implementations. So this is all very encouraging. There's plenty of great multi-cloud strategies for the operators to pursue, and this is good for the industry.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting to see IBM Cloud at, in our research, IBM Cloud at 55% of respondents indicating they plan to use or strongly consider using within 1 to 2 years. And, you know, 55%, Microsoft Azure is 61%. That's a pretty big showing on the part of IBM. Same thing with Oracle. Oracle's at 45%. You know, we're really seeing Oracle double down on cloud. And you've just written about that recently as well, Ron. But it's really exciting to see that there's a lot of options out there. And of course, the important role that multi-cloud plays. So beyond BSS itself, what about connecting to the rest of the technology stack, right? We know BSS is not an island. It has to be tightly integrated with OSS and packet core. Can you speak to that just a little bit, Jason?
Well, I think, you know, if we look at the 5G space, right, I'm picking because it's new, is what we see at the moment is, of course, you're correct. If you look at how now the BSS, it talks directly to the 5G core, it enables new features for monetization like slicing, which is something we launched from Ericsson to prove it and get it going. But the rate of change of features coming out of 5G as they have new standards coming out, Release 17 comes later this year, is the core will need to be updated very quickly. To enable those features. At the same point in time, going back to where we opened, the BSS is the monetization layer. You don't introduce features just for fun. You want to get your return on your investment. Right. So what we see that basically as you upgrade your core, you're probably going to upgrade your BSS in parallel to enable those new features. You don't have to, but to enable those new features to get that return you want to do it. What this actually creates then is you now actually create an interdependency between your BSS, your charging function, and your actual core itself. So some operators are requesting that we connect these in one pipeline such that it's an automatic upgrade. And from an Ericsson point of view, we recognize the end-to-end part of this portfolio is important. So for our customers, we want to say, if you have our core and you have our BSS and you have our OSS, as we upgrade, we will move the whole lot together. To try and simplify that, or simplify it's a complex thing, but try and make that happen for you to realize your investments faster. Because you're right, we don't exist in Ireland. And even northbound, if you want to take from the BSS stack, we also integrated enterprise systems. So they also need to be adapted to understand a new revenue stream. So it's quite a complex piece when you put it together.
Yeah, it is indeed. So I love to focus on customers as part of these conversations. Can you speak a little bit about kind of some of the day-to-day challenges you find your customers facing that you could share with us?
Sure, we touched on it earlier regarding the engineers and the
Right.
the executives. One of the key challenges that's coming up, I suppose, is expectation. It's most people want to do this. I'm also just want to bring back what Ron said. In essence, we need to focus on where we're bringing business value. If you go too thin, you will lose it. So, for example, what we regularly see with, first of all, customers start a cloud native journey across their entire suite, which is just too big, right? And it's you're going to struggle because it takes a lot of money, and it's to change of how the organization works. So what we see that, first of all, people, if they go too broad, they struggle. The engineers get swamped with what they're going to do. The executives are displeased because it's not going as they thought it'd go. So the first thing is to maybe focus on an area. And we touched on it earlier, talking about customer experience. So the customers of our customers, their experience. Now, maybe you pick the layer that needs to move fastest, which is like your customer experience, your digital experience platform to orchestrate. Maybe you start with that cloud native, because that will need to adapt as new offers come in. That will need to provide a better UI, a better way to do things. And when I look at this, the most successful projects, and we've had, we have a customer, one of our customers, who started with the DXP layer themselves, the digital experience platform, because that's where they saw the biggest improvement. They went cloud native with, they were to adapt to customer experiences that they needed very quickly, get quicker time to market, quicker onboarding, and that in itself gave a good return on investment, which then built momentum for the rest of the business. So if you go too broad, you run into it. But I think, as Rana said, Susie, if we actually focus on an area, you'll benefit most.
Well, and I think that we find that when it comes to any kind of introduction of technology into the business, it's about focusing small, generally speaking,
Yep.
and having great success. And before you know it, my experience has been that before you know it, even those skeptics are watching the results that you're able to deliver. And all of a sudden you've got this avalanche of people going, wait a minute, I want a piece of that. Yeah. So it can be really exciting, but to me, that scattershot approach is not the way to go. It really is about focusing on, where we can deliver the best results the quickest, and then have this use case throughout the organization. And that's really what gets the excitement going and helps you move this forward.
And I think some of the, maybe just one more challenge is, this is not just a technology project, right? This is not just a platform modernization. It's what is this doing for my business? How can I move faster and quicker? And I think that's where the focus, like any typical business transformation, if you drive it from the ground up, it'll struggle. It has to really be set broader, yeah.
Absolutely. So how do we measure the success of this BSS journey to cloud?
Every organization will have their own metrics. I mean, if I just go back to being blunt, at the end of the day, what you want to measure is an improvement, right? Whether it's I have a quicker time to market, whether I can launch my offers quicker, whether I have a lower cost to run my operations. There'll be many metrics towards this. And I think the key thing for me, when you talk about measure, you need to start with a vision. Where do I want to go with my business? How does my application stack support me? How fast does it need to move? And then if you pick, for example, you say, okay, today my, like anything, my customer onboarding time is 5 minutes to completion. Maybe I invest and I get down to 5 seconds as part of digitizing. They're the kind of metrics. I don't think you can measure one big metric and go, we're now entirely cloud native. That's probably a bit over ambitious. Like the focus, I break it down, because what helps the engineering teams and what helps the business, this is what we're doing. How do we all achieve this goal? For example, improving customer onboarding time? Can we get it from 5 minutes to 5 seconds, or whatever the number is? So I think that's really how you measure, and realize that this doesn't stop, because if you're moving, your competition are also moving, right? So maybe you're 5 seconds, but your competition is 3 seconds. I don't know. So I think you will get by realizing that the core of your business process have moved much faster, much more reliable, and much more scalable than you ever had before. And that metric is unique for every business.
Yeah, and I think, to your point, understanding that done is not really a thing, and I look at some of our, I look at, which I don't say to make anybody nervous, by the way, but when it comes to business transformation, it is a constantly evolving, constantly changing thing. As you said, your customers are changing, your competitors are changing and evolving. And so I look at some of the data from our research, and we asked people how much time they felt from today it would take them to be complete. And while a number of people, a number of engineers indicated they thought it would be 1 to 2 years, 46% of engineers thought it might be 1 to 2 years, but yet 30% of engineers and developers surveyed said that it's going to be 2 to 3 years. And, I like seeing that. And I like seeing that 35% of senior executives believed that it was going to be 2 to 3 years. I mean, this is a process, and and that doesn't mean that you don't start it and have some great results early on in the process, but it is kind of a continually moving, evolving transformation that I think is important for people to understand as they go on this journey.
I think it's important to recognize, even with that, legacy stuff will still exist.
Right.
We still have technology out there that's 20 years old, doing its thing. It's reliable. It's good. The question for you as a business, though, is, do I invest further in that, or just let it serve its purpose and die off and move forward? So that's what I mean. It's really hard to say, when are we complete? I think, like any transformation, you have to make your business decision that works, leave it alone, but for the future, I'm going to invest over here. Yeah.
Right. One of the things I tell anybody that I'm interviewing with a view toward joining our team is that if you don't love change, you won't love working for and with me, and you won't love working in this industry, because that's really that's what we're in the business of all day, every day. And that's really what we're talking about here. So, we're going to wrap up this show. And I think there are, the pragmatic route forward as you're thinking about your BSS Cloud journey is really pretty simple. You want to throw it out there for us, Jason?
I will try. I would say set your vision, focus, start small, mature yourself to this cloud native journey.
Yeah.
Right? It is literally a journey. Mature yourself, get your early wins, and build the culture and confidence in your organization to get forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Ron, you have anything to close us out?
Well, that's an excellent point, Jason. It's hard to top that. I think it's about innovation. I think there's an opportunity in the post-pandemic era for operators, for example, to extend security policies and quality service policies to the work from home workforce. And that is have innovation in billing, make what was formerly a consumer bill now an enterprise bill, and as a result have very creative bundling and so forth. And also, I think broader open API interactions is another indicator of progress. That is, the operators using the open APIs not only to improve their interworking with partners and improving customer satisfaction, but also improving their internal interactions, particularly, for example, on the DevOps side. So I think these are some takeaways for us in terms of, what do we need to look at, and what can an operator do to really shine in the digital 5G era.
Yeah, I agree. Solid points. Gentlemen, thank you so much for hanging out here today and having this conversation. It's always an interesting one. And I know that it's something we'll continue to talk about. As I indicated, in our show notes, we'll link the research report that we did on BSS-to-Cloud journeys. We'll link prior conversations. And we hope that if this is on your radar screen, that you will take some time and, take a look at some of the research and some of the information that we've shared. And I think you'll find it useful. And with that, we'll see you next time.